So let me tell you just a little bit about who I am. My name's Toni Macri-Reiner, and I've been a hypnotist for, I think, about 12 years now. I did grow up with a dad who became a hypnotist. He didn't do it for a living. We owned an Italian restaurant, but he did past life regression while I was in high school. And yes, there are a lot of stories about that with kids from my Catholic high school sneaking off to be regressed into their past life. And even to this day, I'll run into some and they go, my mother knew back then what I was doing. So I knew, I was familiar with hypnosis. I knew what it could do. That was his main thing. He was just interested in past life and a lot of other alternative things back then. Well, I've been a potter. I was a potter for the last 30 years. I did fine art, fine craft shows, and traveled around half the country. And at some point, I thought this stuff is heavy. I'm lugging it around. I'm working all the time. And so I wanted to do something else. So I just sort of put it out there to the universe. What could I do that satisfies my soul? And I was going through not a Robert Dilts, but Richard Bandler book and the NPL guys. And the word hypnosis jumped out at me. It was like there was a laser from my forehead to the word. And I thought, I can do that. I mean, I know what hypnosis can do. So anyway, long story short, I transitioned over a couple of years to become a certified hypnotist. I don't really do past life regression. I have, but it's not my thing exactly. So I usually refer on. And so I'm really interested in the way the brain works and the way that the neuro aspect of how we make changes in our lives. So I'm going to talk and tell you some things. I'm going to break it down so that I always say, so if I can understand it, anybody else can understand it. It's sort of like Neuro 101, preschool level. And then we'll do some demos and you guys have questions. I have 3 techniques to teach. So let's get started. So have you ever thought about the idea that all problems start with a thought? And you'll find that if you haven't noticed already, clients come to you for 4 problems. They feel something they don't want to feel. They do something they don't want to do. They don't do something they need to do, or they want to do something better. Really, most things break down into those categories. It's amazing how much we've learned about the brain in the last 30 years, because for 150 years, we really knew not very much at all. We just thought that once you were born, you had all the neurons that you were going to have for the rest of your life. And that's not really true. We now know that every day, let me see what's the statistic, that you create an average of 1 million neural connections are made for every second of your life. It's kind of amazing. But how do those neural connections actually happen, and what's the process that allows them to make connections? Enter Donald Hebb's law. I'll just share you the science speak, and what he's famous for is neurons that fire together, wire together. So what this means is that when your brain fires off 2 neurons or sets of neurons at the same time, they begin to be wired together. You can think about it like when you see the Nike logo, you might just think of the phrase, just do it. It's like the 2 networks get to know each other. It's like they're shaking hands, getting to know one another, and those 2 thoughts or ideas are linked together. And marketers really count on this happening because they want you to usually associate visually or auditorily with their tagline. So our clients ruminate. They think about their problem in so many different ways. They think about their problem, they feel the problem inside, they worry that they'll never be able to change the problem. So Hebb's law, and he was, let me look at my note for a second, 1904 to 1985, just to give you an idea about that. So Hebb's law is based on a process that takes place within the brain called long-term potentiation, or LTP. And what that is LTP explains how 2 specific neurons are wired together. So if you go back to the idea of the neurons shaking hands together when they meet, long-term potentiation, or LTP, explains what happens after the first time they shake hands. So when that first neuron fires together, they puts off a little neurotransmitter that travels over to the second neuron. You guys might have seen images. There used to be a great kind of visual of that I saw on YouTube. I can't find it anymore. But so this signal that is sent to the second neuron causes that second neuron to fire as well. But what it also does is that second neuron begins to open up other transmitters that might have been closed or hidden. And that second neuron becomes more sensitive. It's almost as if it's expecting another handshake. So when neurons fire, they tend to make neighboring neurons not only fire, but want to fire. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I thought about it as you go out on a new date and it's really exciting and you tell your friends about it. So they kind of come out of the woodwork to say, are you going on another date? What's it like? Is it happening? You know, they're kind of there in the background. So this really shows us that research does support the idea that what you get, what you focus on. Because the more you're focusing on that neuron, which is the next law we'll talk about, the more your brain fires in that direction. So the fact that gives you a great reason to interrupt your client's story, basically, because the more time they're going to that story, the more they're entrenching it in their neural pattern, which is interrupting that pattern is called we want to break the quantum Zeno effect. Try saying that a few times in a row, the quantum Zeno effect. So an example of explaining that is that suppose you're walking in the mall. It's a busy shopping mall and somebody bumps into you. Well, nowadays that might be even more serious, but somebody bumps into you. You don't know the person, you've never seen them before. You don't really think too much about it. Now, if that person bumped into you several times and you saw them again, you'd notice them. But what if they bumped into you several more times and then they leaned in and made a snide remark or said something really nasty to you? You would react. And this is what your neurons do. They become more sensitive when they fire more than one time. They don't really change, but they do become more sensitive to each other. And that first sensitivity of just noticing something, it lasts for a day or two. It's not a permanent change. You're not going to remember that person forever with just a couple bumps. But the more times the neurons fire there, the more permanent that long-term potentiation, the LTP, becomes. And as LTP continues, it leads to a permanent rewiring, which is Hebb's law. Now, suppose the person that bumped into you and made snide remarks really made you mad, said something rude, and you just walked away and you played it over in your mind. You thought about it. You told a friend about it. You got home that evening and your family asked, how was your day? And you told them about it. You said, this person in the mall, on and on and on. So running these thoughts around in your mind is called the quantum Zeno effect. And it's different from long-term potentiation because the effect doesn't really have to be about the guy in the mall bumping into you. It just can be remembering what happened, replaying it to yourself, talking about it, beating yourself up. I shoulda, coulda, woulda said this if it happened again. So all these things, all these reactions reinforce that neural link between the person, the bump, the emotions, and just replaying that situation over and over, good or bad. It rewires those neurons. But the good news is this can also work the other way, which is good for change workers because the quantum Zeno effect, and here's the sciencey part, it's a principle in physics that states that observing the rate of decay in a particle or system actually slows down the decay. They've watched this change particles that were being observed. In other words, the process of observation stabilizes the system. It's really a case of a watch pot never boils. To put it simply, the more we pay attention to something, it persists. What you resist persists, or what you focus on resists. So to help clients make change, we really need to disrupt this old pattern of their thoughts and feelings. And we need to attach the event to their resource state. But if we don't help them disassociate from that negative pattern to stop it, it's hard to find the resource state, basically. And these techniques that we're going to go through, and you may know some of them, you may know none of them, I don't know, you may know all of them. They're really all pretty much based on the meta pattern. And I'm not really going to go into that. I'm going to teach a standalone class on that in October. So the meta pattern is basically associate the client into the problem, disassociate them, find the resource state, and then basically it's a copy and paste of the resource state onto the problem. And basically all these these techniques do that. And a lot of change work, if you start noticing that. I do a lot of conversational work with people besides the trance work. I always tell them by the time we get to the trance work, you've already made a lot of changes. We're just cementing things in, using your unconscious to go in and tweak things, change things. It depends on what the work specific problem, but that's pretty much how I work, because you've got to get the client out of that problem into a more neutral state to even find a resource. And you might have worked with clients. I have a couple right now that it is so difficult finding a resource state for them. Maybe they've not had any good stuff happen. And sometimes the best we can do is like just feel your feet on the floor, be in the moment, if that's the best resource state we have. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get those resource states. But basically, the more you interrupt their problem and attach the good resource to that, and then your brain begins to generalize it, because your brain doesn't want to work any harder than it has to. It likes to make those programs. And so once you create that detour around the problem that stops them from going to the problem, and then attach it to all different aspects. And now when you see your boss's face feeling the way you do now, and now when you walk into that room where in the past you felt some way, but now feeling great, what are you feeling now? Those are the kind of ways that I work. But Hebb's law will do the rest. Once you keep going to somewhere else, those neurons will wire. Does anybody, to take a break for a second, anybody have any questions or anything for me before we do it in a technique? That was a lot of talking on my part. Okay.
I just love that you're validating that talk-based therapies can actually keep a person stuck in the problems, because I actually have had clients where they'll be feeling fine. They'll be having a good day, but they know they have therapy later. So they have to like go, oh, I better come up with a problem because I have to talk about a problem for an hour. And I don't want to waste my money by just going there and being happy. I'm just like,
Exactly.
Anyway.
I've started
thank you
even
for validating that.
Yes. I've started even asking my clients that are also in a talk therapy mode that to just be careful. I'm not dissing the talk therapy, I'm trying to dance around it, but it's like I teach them these things. I mean, not specifically the way your brain's wiring, but I give them a lot of neuro information. Look, we're wiring it. Go to that place. That bully in your brain is lighting up. But I say, if you have a talk therapy, just be mindful of going back into the story. There's one thing about getting some reframing of how it happened or that, but I don't know. I just try to bite my tongue and not say too much because I don't want them to undo what we've done, so the thing about seeing a therapist for 30 years, it's like, do you just need to pay somebody to talk to, or are you really not having any results? Because I have therapist friends, yeah, my client of 30 years. And I'm always like, whoa, okay. Anyway, enough of that. So the first technique that I have to demonstrate, you guys can all do this. I'm looking mostly at blank screens, except for a few of you. So I don't know what you're doing and you're not doing, but it's called bilateral stimulation. You guys that I'm seeing familiar with that? So bilateral stimulation is basically, in its simplest form, it's the idea of moving back and forth with the midline of the body. You can do it with your hands. You can just sit there and move your eyes back and forth. It's not EMDR, but it does cross the hemisphere of your brain. You're just kind of noticing what you're feeling, moving your eyes back and forth. You can move your hands and your eyes, and I'll demonstrate how I show clients to do it to start off with. I've used the eyes only when I was actually in a therapy session with my family, my grown daughters, which of course, if you have grown children, you know how that could come up pretty easily. You could end up in therapy. And I was feeling myself kind of going, whoa, I'm leaving the room. I'm just not even here. I'm ready to get up and just walk out. So I thought, okay, what can you use that nobody's noticing that you're doing? So I just started moving my eyes back and forth. And it only took about 2 times on each side. And it was like, whoosh, I'm back in the room. And I was like, I'm okay. And I thought, whoa, that really works. So now I do teach clients, if you're in a situation and you can't be moving your hands, just move your eyes. So I'm going to move my thing down. I do have clients usually, whoa, I just put water in there. So I'll grab something else. I do have them grab a water bottle or something. So if anybody wants to participate, you can use your hands if you don't have anything handy, bottle, anything to pass back and forth. So notice, take a moment and find some kind of anxiety, if you will, kind of demonstrates it. Find something, just kind of nod, something you're a little, got something there. And then what you do, and if I have a client doing it and they're very anxious, I'll just stop them for a minute and hand them something, or do this, follow me. And while they're talking about the stuff, I will just have them. So you just move one hand out to the side. And often you'll find people doing this and they're going like this because, of course, they're wound up. And when you're anxious, you move fast because your body's trying to down regulate. And it feels good to be fast because that's how the rest of you is going, but you want to slow it down. And you just keep doing this. And if I'm doing it with them, I will just kind of talk and I'll slow my voice and I'll just breathe. And then if I were doing it with my hands, I'm just going out. You want to keep it in the midline and just go out to the side. And if they're really still kind of freaking out, I'll say, hold your head still and just move your eyes side to side with your hand. And some people have a hard time doing it. It's like, keep your head still right in the middle, or, keep your head in the middle. And so when you do that, so just notice, those of you, whoever's doing it, did you notice a difference in that? Bit of a difference. It can really calm you down. And you can also use this for cravings. How do you know, which is the big question, the biggest question I ever ask is, how do you know something? I don't want to know why it's happening. I want to know how you know inside it's happening. So that's the one thing I have them do. You can kind of do, I always say, go in the bathroom. You can always go in the bathroom and have some privacy and do what you're going to do. If you're craving something, notice that feeling inside. If you're anxious, how do you know that? And just kind of go with the anxiety. Try not to say your anxiety, and do that. So that is, let me see if I have anything else to say about it. What it does is it activates both hemispheres of your brain so that you're spreading the blood and electrical impulses throughout the whole brain. And it floods the area of association and diffuses it. And then the bully cluster of anxiety, it can't hold together anymore. People think that when they're anxious, their whole brain is anxious. And that's not really the case. It's usually on one hemisphere or the other. And so going back and forth, crossing the midline begins to disrupt that, as you see. So when you notice the thoughts and feelings, sometimes you can have them rate it 1 to 10, 0 to 10, pass it back and forth. And just notice, is it the same or different? And like anything else, I always like to equip my clients with at least 3 tools. After that, they're zoning out. It gets to be too much unless it's a really simple thing. But 3 things. I always send them an email afterwards. Here's what this is. Here's what this is. Here's how you do it, so they don't forget. But that way they are equipped so that when something comes up, they've got a tool, they've got a technique. Because it is not all about being in your office and you saying magic words. At least that's what I tell them. It's not my magic words that are really going to totally help you. It's you helping yourself and stopping that pattern that will really help. So the spin, guys, anybody know the spin? Okay. All right. One of the consistent things about anxiety is that it's a physical feeling in the body, and it's always moving, and it's usually moving fast. If you think about a time when you were startled by something, and that feeling that comes in usually in your belly, kind of like, oh, up that, it goes out. It doesn't last because you're okay after that. If you think about the last time you were startled, but anxiety, it goes around. Now, when I ask clients to close their eyes and notice where that anxiety is, sometimes I have to kind of coach them through a little bit. I want them to come up with it, but I will ask them to, let me move my screen down. I ask them to move their hands. And as I'm talking, as I'm observing them from when they first come in and they're telling me about the problem and they're showing me where the problem is, because the body is the unconscious, they're showing me, oh my gosh, that happens, when I see her text, I just get so anxious and I just feel that in my body. It's okay. So I know that they are noticing the anxiety is moving this way. Sometimes they notice it going around like this. I want to follow the way they've done it. This is more awkward to do, but usually clients will tell you this or this. How do you know? And if they say, I don't know, I don't know which way it's moving. It's like, well, it's got to be moving, because if it were still, you'd feel calm. So it's moving. So they'll show you. So say it's going like this. So I'll ask them to imagine it being outside of their body. Just imagine that fear is on your lap, that feeling in your body. And as you keep moving your hands in that direction, and sometimes they'll be going like this because they'll really feel it. I'll be mimicking what they're doing. I'll be kind of leading. Slow it down. Take a breath and just slow that down. And when you've got it almost stopped, sometimes it takes them a moment to just really slow it down. I want you to reverse it. Reverse the direction it was going. And then I want you to make it faster and faster. And I've done this just kind of conversationally, got them doing it rather than, okay, here's what we're going to do. I just lead them into it. And so you get it going faster and faster, as fast as you can go. And when you know that's changed, put your hands over your heart, take a deep breath, and notice. It always changes because it's changing the energy, the way they're representing it. Did anybody do that along and notice it? Okay, good. Yeah, it's a really great technique. And I had a client recently who's really very OCD, makes lists, checks her lists are making her crazy, all this stuff. And she really did this as we were talking. She had her hands kind of low, but it was always this kind of movement. And once I taught her the spin, and that's when we just did it kind of conversational, I'm like, just kind of follow my hands, because she was already worked up. She goes, oh my gosh, I realize how much I do that all the time. She goes, and then the second session she came back, she goes, I've just been spinning backwards so much, and I can just really tell a difference how much it's helping. So that's one of the techniques that I use. My first technique after my intake is faster tapping. I use a lot of that. I trained with Robert Smith for that style of tapping. To me, it works faster. It's easier to teach the client. They'll actually do it. It's very targeted with how do you know, noticing how you know, tapping on 5 points, going to a good place. It gets those neurons, that bully that lights up, and then it's scrambled by being in the meridian system. And then you go to your good place. And that makes those neurons, after they do a round of tapping, it's usually, is it the same or different? Well, I still think about it, but now it seems like it's over there. They're way more dissociated from it. It's just not as emotionally present on them. And that's what we want. So that's kind of my first go-to, just because for a while I was kind of, after a few years after doing hypnosis, I was kind of like, does this really work? I know it works, but I need something else. So when I started studying the tapping, it was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is it. And then I realized how boring it is. It's boring for me. It's boring for the client to just be tapping all the time, even though it's working. So I do it first now, and I do tap on a few things depending on what they've told me. But then it's like, okay, I'm doing it because I want to teach them, and I want to show them how fast a change can be made, especially with smokers. It's like, come in craving a cigarette. You can see how fast that craving disappears. And then in my practice, I do the arrow, Anthony Jacquin's arrow, but I've changed it, and it's not quite as, to be honest, abrasive. I love him, or Freddie Jacquin. I love him. I think he's great. It's just not my style, the way he does it. So I've kind of changed that. And I have him put all those things that I would have tapped through in the bullseye, because I use it for everything, and shoot it out. And when they come out, it's almost like a condenser. When they come through that bullseye and they can't find that stuff, they're like, holy crap, this stuff works. So I love that. And that happens. So back to more the techniques that I would do. Let me see here with the spin.
Hey, a lot of people in here are RTT and they haven't studied any of Freddie or Anthony Jacquin stuff.
Okay.
If you have time at some point before this is over to just go through your version of the arrow.
I will.
Wonderful. Fantastic.
Yeah, let me do this one technique because it's pretty quick. Sure. And then, yeah, I'm happy to. Just in my class last night, because I'm teaching hypnosis now, I have a certification class, and I made them do the arrow again because I realized we'd covered it early on, and I don't think they were practicing it. And it's, you guys, I use this in every single session. It's so easy, just learn it. So yeah. So the next one is the emotional detox technique. And I'm blanking on the person's name I want to give credit for. He's passed away, but Kelly Woods got this from him and shared it with me through Hypnotic Women. So what it is is basically it's an anchor collapse. You're collapsing the negative by bringing in the positive. So to demonstrate, find something, and sometimes in a session, it's like we're getting rid of stuff. And I'm like, oh, wait, don't really get rid of that because I need to do this other thing to teach it to you. So bring some anxiety back. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So if you can find something that's bothering you, a worry, something maybe you're ruminating about, just a little anxiety, something. Everybody got something? Okay. So what you do is I just have them take a deep breath and close your eyes. Just inhale, exhale. You can create a safe space in your mind and just allow yourself to feel whatever that disturbing, annoying thing is, upsetting. Just get in touch with the feelings. And as you make it strong, just make a fist with your right hand. Just make that fist, and I tell people if you do this in front of other people, you can even just rub your fingers together. But in this, you just make a fist. Let all those feelings sort of flow down into that fist. And then inhale, exhale, and open your eyes. Release your fist. Now take another breath and close your eyes. Just think of something neutral for a minute. Think of the color of socks or shoes you have on, the color of your front door. It's just a little state break. Think of something else. Sometimes I'll ask clients, do you smell popcorn? Which is really weird because we're online. So now I want you to think of really a good place. Picture yourself in your good place, all the good feelings. Just enjoy those feelings. It's a really good day, maybe just outside on a nice day. And make a fist with your left hand and just breathe in and out. That's right. Just enjoy that feeling, the strong feelings as it goes into your left fist. And then release your fist. Again, think of something neutral, the color car you have, color of the tree outside your window, just anything. Now, in a moment, you're going to take a breath in, exhale, and you're going to make a fist with both hands at the same time when I count to 3. You can open or close your eyes. 1, 2, 3. Both fists at the same time. And just sit there in a neutral place. Just relax. Maybe you can mentally count to 5. Notice your breath. And then open your hands. And see if you can find that old thing as easily. Some people like this. Some people it doesn't resonate as much for. But it's a good thing when it is working for your client, because of course, certain things are going to resonate more than other things, but it's just one more thing for them to do during the day. I want my clients doing these techniques every day, one at a time. It only takes a minute or so that they are breaking those patterns. So, okay, that was it. Any questions, comments on anything so far? I can do the arrow. Not that I'm stealing Freddie's thing. I did buy it from him. And I actually was a demonstration person at Hypnothoughts Live 2 years ago in front of a packed room of all the names of hypnosis. I will never volunteer for that again, but I was having knee issues and which one reason going through it with Freddie, it made me realize something that kind of caught me and didn't let me, I did it. But anyway, that's one reason I've changed it. So this is my version. So go ahead, take a deep breath, close your eyes if you would. And think of something think of something worrisome, you could think of a whole group of things, family stuff, COVID, clients, I don't know, anything, I usually have them put a lot of stuff in here. So when you close your eyes, I wonder if you can imagine floating above yourself. Now, not everybody can do that as easily. So I use the context of imagining that you're sitting in a very high stadium, a huge stadium in those very high seats. Stadium can be empty or full, it doesn't matter. But as you sit way up there, and I give a minute, you can nod if you got that image, if you're there. And from that high vantage point, I wonder if part of you can continue floating up out of the stadium so that you have that bird's eye view. That blimp view they show into the stadium from high above, just floating on a breeze. And just nod when you've got that. Great. Now I want you to notice that way over there is a huge archery target. Now, an archery target has a red ring, a blue ring, and that black bullseye. And in that black bullseye, put all the stuff that you want to get rid of in any way that works for you. You can think of it and know it's in there. You can picture it going in there. Just know that you're putting it all in there. And I'll wait a few seconds. Nod when it's in there. And now, in a moment, but not yet, I'm going to count to 3 and I'm going to make this sound. And when I make that sound, you are going to be shot like an arrow through that bullseye. Now be brave, because for a millisecond, you may feel all those old, anxious, nervous, worrisome, whatever it is, feelings for the very last time. So get ready, because when you come out the other side, just feeling blissful, floating freely, being you, free of all the old stuff. Maybe seeing the faces of the people that you care about and love and that care about you, feeling the love they have for you. So get ready. 1, 2, 3, shoo, right through that bullseye. That's right, just floating freely. Enjoying just being you at your core, knowing you're enough, you've always been enough, and you will be enough. Seeing the faces of those people, that's right. And that you that's floating around out there can just drop down into the room with you, looking over at you, resting so comfortably, noticing what you're wearing. And when it knows you've changed, it just floats back over to you, drops down into the deepest part of you. And you can stay deeply relaxed if you want to relax, or feel energized and ready to open your eyes whenever you're ready. Being unable to find any of that old useless, needless, unnecessary stuff. And try to find it and find you cannot. The harder you try, the further it goes. It's like a slippery thought that slides out of your mind as soon as it begins. Try to find it and find you cannot. And I usually say that just as people are open. And when I see their eyes open, starting to open, I will put in that last part. Try to find it. So I don't know, feedback from anybody that participated. Can you find that old stuff? I find usually people can, and they're like, whoa.
I like your version.
It's a little bit softer and more contextual.
It's also slower, because it takes me a while to get, I'm not the most visual person, despite what I do for a living. So it takes me a while to like get it all together and in the center of the bullseye and like really picturing it. I also struggled to like pull myself out of my body and look down. Like, that's just not working for me. Some of my clients, it's like so easy, but not for me. So thank you. That was beautiful.
I found that too. If somebody just says float up, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not there. And I'm really pretty visual, but sometimes I'm the kinesthetic part. I'm not quite there. So that's why I had most people can kind of imagine, or I use the words get a sense of a lot, so that I stop myself from saying see so much. Get a sense of whatever sense you're using. Most people have seen something on TV of a sports show that they're shooting down on the top of a stadium or the open stadium. And so I always figured that is something most people can relate to. Books, I'll say something in a minute about that. And so, I just kind of slowed it down, added a little more context. It kind of depends. Sometimes I'll just say, that stuff. And I might remind them of a few traumas that they've mentioned. It's like, just put it in there and go. Book-wise, most of my studying, some of my studying has been, wait a minute, my computer's sitting on the book. You wouldn't see it anyway, is Melissa Tiers and Sean Carson's Keeping the Brain in Mind. It's wonderful. It's easy to understand. And I'm sure Melissa's made come up with new things since they wrote it. But the other thing is I listened to Andrew Huberman, the Huberman podcast, Huberman Lab. And he has a lot of good sciencey info that breaks it down so it's understandable. Because if I were to read a science book that were telling me all this, it would just be gobbledygook for me. I want to know how it relates to me, how it relates to my clients. And Yeah, so in my hypnosis training, I make sure my students, we of course cover hypnosis because none of them have any background in hypnosis at this point. The group I had now are all healers in their own right. But so once we learned the trance stuff, yeah, okay, you guys can do this. Now, here's all these other things that add to your change work because there's so many ways to help people make changes. And that's what I focus a lot of on. So they really understand the basics of how the brain's working, how the brain's changing. And of course, in a basic 100-hour class, it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg because there's so much to learn. But does anybody have any questions or comments or anything else?
How long does your certification process take in your
Um,
class?
this last one was 10 weeks, although I'm adding an 11th week because I didn't feel that was quite enough. But my next one that starts in September is 12 weeks with a week off for Thanksgiving. I can't really stretch it out too much more because of the holidays, but I think I keep going back and forth. It's either starting the 15th or the 22nd. My web person's like, make up your mind. So yeah, if you want more info about that, there'll be a link, and the link for the PDF for the basics of what I told you and the 3 techniques, the arrow isn't in it because I didn't think about that. There'll be a link.
I posted the PDF in the group.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that you can get that. And yeah, if there's any questions or anything. I've also studied with Richard. I've been certified actually a couple times because my first certification was locally. I'm in Indiana, and it was terrible. It sucked. He was awful. I can't even say anything good. Anybody I know that trained with him, it's terrible.
Richard Bandler?
No.
Oh,
no. It's
Richard
a local person. Richard Nongard. Yeah, I'm not talking about Richard Nongard. I'm saying the local person I trained with. And
gotcha.
the good part about realizing how little he taught us was, and what a bully he was that, okay, I got to learn a lot of stuff. I don't know anything. So it really let me seek out a lot more trainers. And then I don't know what year it was. A few years ago, I recertified with Melissa Tiers, and I studied NLP with John Overdorf, both of my heroes. And I've done a lot of Richard Nongard's workshops and classes too. So I feel like I have a pretty good overall thing. I'm getting ready to do some other training in the fall that's more mind body. It's called, Psych K. I just heard about it. Yeah. So that's sort
I
of
love that you're training other people to become hypnotists while you're continuing your education. That's like, I love that.
Always. I mean, we're always learning.
We have some messages here.
Okay.
Doomy asked if there were any books about the specific techniques that you mentioned. I know that the Jacqueline, the big one, hypnotherapy, has the arrow.
Right.
I wasn't sure about emotional detox or the spin. Bilateral stimulation is also in MMHA as a pattern interrupter.
Okay. I don't think so as far as the emotional detox, because that is, and I'm picturing the man, and he passed away a couple of years ago and I can't think of his name. He was pretty famous. I don't know that that's in a book. And what was the other one? The spin. I'm not really sure about that. I know Melissa teaches it, but yeah, I'm not sure.
And then another question, can you advise more on incorporating talk therapy into a hypnosis session, or tell us how to find out more about it?
As far as talk therapy, do you mean conversational work? Is that kind of?
I'm not sure. It's Kim Wilson is the one. So let's see. Maybe she'll unmute herself.
Kim.
Hi, thank you. Because I found, like, I've trained in RTT, but I have to say that for me personally, I haven't had the magic instant results as we've been told that it can produce, right? And I know, though, that hypnotherapy can get you to a result faster than traditional counseling. But I have actually personally chosen to continue with an old traditional counselor of mine, and sometimes he does EDMR. But because I feel like, and I think I've noticed this with some of my clients too, sometimes you need the life skills. Sometimes it's not just trying to go to the regress to the problem and reframe it. It's not just that. You need a little bit more than that in terms of even figuring it out, or maybe just getting something off your chest, so to speak, or whatever, or having someone to discuss stuff with. But how do you find the fine balance, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I will let clients talk. And there have been a few times where I've thought, okay, they just need to talk. I'm just going to listen. I'm not a talk therapist. I will listen. I have opinions, but I'll just let them talk until sometimes it takes, my question always is, what do you want to work through today? And there are times I have to ask that question multiple times in a session. Okay, all right, so you're telling me about this, but what is it you really want to work through today? Because to me, it's like we're working through this. And I do believe that people need to have tools. I always say, it's too bad we weren't born, we didn't come out holding a handbook with, here's how you get through some of this stuff you're going to go through in life. Nope, we were just left to figure it out on our own. Not a good design. So it is a valid thing with letting people vent a little bit, because sometimes they need to. And I will say, I use my hand a lot. I stop them. Okay, I'm not a talk therapist, so let's get to how you want to feel better today. So that's when I will start with the techniques. And it depends which session we're on. I generally see people for 3 sessions, 3 to 5 sessions. Because if they're not already really having some major changes by the 3rd session, it's like, okay, let's tweak. What is it you want? Or are we working on other things now? And that stuff, first stuff's okay. So that's why I do, and I tell them up front, I work conversationally. I'm going to teach you some techniques. It's not about me saying a lot of magic words when you're in my office, because that's part of it. But you need to know, we're pulling up your resources, and you need to know these things to help your brain change. And when you explain that, how their brain has made a habit of over and over feeling the same thing, thinking the same thing, and you want to create a detour, you're stopping it. And sometimes I even use the thing of just stop it. When you notice it, you have to tell your brain to think something else. And I use some submodality shifts with, if they're thinking, this is maybe not answering your question, maybe I'm getting off track here. But
no, it's okay. I appreciate it, what you're saying.
Yeah, I will use some things of notice those thoughts. If you're hearing the thoughts, if they were a voice, whose thoughts were they that you would never take seriously? Is it a cartoon, a political figure, whose voice would you not take seriously? I try to reframe some of that with them. So those changes are taking place, because I'm a huge believer in hypnosis, because I say, you've been talking about this stuff. If you sound like a smart person, if you could have figured this out, you probably would have figured it out, which tells me it's an unconscious problem. So let's work on it from an unconscious level.
So basically, they've
level.
already been hypnotizing themselves. You just have to pull them out of that trance and put them into a useful trance.
Yeah, you're in a bad trance. Let's change it into a good one. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you. And then just one other quick question with other people might.
You're breaking up, Kim.
Do you teach the course, like all of this?
I do. This is part of my course, and my classmates my students might say I'm kind of a tough teacher. I don't know if they'd say that or not, but they have to practice. They have to turn practice sheets in and things like that, because having bad training for my first training, if I had been somebody not as dedicated or tenacious to, I know I want to do this and I know I'll be good at it, it would have been very disheartening for me. And I want my students to come out at least having a good basis in, I know hypnosis. I may not know everything exactly right to say, I'll figure that out, but I know a lot of techniques that will help people change. And so they will make a change. So I feel like I'm getting pretty good feedback. It's my first class to teach, but I've sort of been working towards it for a while. And it's a lot of personal attention. I've only had 7 people, not only, but I've had 7 people in this first class. So they'll email me and ask me questions. We do demos in the class. They have to watch videos and read certain things.
So it sounds like there's a lot of one-on-one interaction. Like it's not just videos of you that are watching. It's like you're right there to answer questions and help them and show them. And that's fantastic.
Yeah. There probably should be more videos. Yeah, there probably should be. Don't tell Richard. I probably should have more videos that I'm doing it rather than other people's videos. But I'll get there. There'll be more of me in the next class. But no, every class, they're not just watching videos. We're talking, practicing, discussing. Yeah.
And I love that you're teaching the hypnosis fundamentals, because speaking from a perspective of having done RTT as my first introduction to hypnosis and hypnotherapy, there's not much being taught about the fundamentals of hypnosis or the background and the foundation and the different,
Oh, yeah.
Contributors. So that's
Yeah,
really nice.
I really know nothing about RTT. I've heard about it, and I've learned, I'm in this group, so I've kind of picked up different things about it. But yeah, I don't really know.
It's a
what
great
you have to
method.
know.
I just found that it wasn't enough. So I have
Sure.
since then been certified by two others, and then I'm working on an NLP, so 3 other organizations. But I love that you're doing the same thing that I was seeking. Like you're offering what I was seeking
Oh,
to
cool.
sort of supplement my RTT training, because I was like, it's great, but it's just not quite enough.
Yeah, I call mine integrated hypnosis training, because they're really getting a fair amount of NLP too, because I don't really see how you separate the two out myself.
Yeah.
They just get a lot of the, I don't know, the NLP-ish, I call it, things. I mean, we're not going in depth to all the presuppositions and that. I mean, I post them, they can have those and figure them out, but I'm not spending a lot of time on that. But just some of the submodality shifts and things like that, it just works. And it's a great way to be I don't know. I just want them to have a good basis, so when they go out into the world, they won't be going, oh my gosh, she didn't teach us anything,
Yeah.
So.
Will you have put a link up so that people can check out your program if anybody wants to?
Yeah, I sent you the
I might
link.
actually go through it and get certified yet again, because your program sounds pretty awesome.
Thanks. I did message you the link, Carissa. Do you want me to post it?
I posted the PDF.
There should be
link.
another link to my training as well, integrated hypnosis training. Look at
Let me
that
look.
message and
Okay.
see. It was the first one because I forgot to.
Oh, I see it. Yep. I didn't go up high enough. All right. So I will post
you
that
want
in Facebook right now. And I guess if you want to finish up with any questions and answers, I'm going to mute myself now and go post that.
Yeah. Anything else? I really appreciate being able to do this. I love talking about this stuff. And yeah, if you have any questions about the course or anything like that, it's going to be going up live in the next day or two. I just had a couple things to get out of the way first. So yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I hope you guys got something out of it and enjoyed it. Carissa, you're muted.
If anybody has questions, just unmute yourself like I forgot to do.